afternoon, everybody. My name is Nancy Laurie Stuckey. I'm your Northern California Account Executive. I've been with Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt for the past 16 years. And I'm excited that Thomas has decided to go forward with the secondary review. I'm only going to talk for a couple seconds just to kind of give you some information on what you have in front of you. So I know after school is tough to come to a presentation after a long day of teaching, so we're providing you with a little lunch box, and in there you'll find a little kind bar that's gluten-free, right, Renee? Yep. Gluten-free for those gluten-free people. And there's tabs in there, there's post-it notes, there's stickers, there's a stylus pen to use on your devices if you want to, so that's all yours to keep. The teacher's editions that we sent into you are also yours to use, so please feel free to tab them, highlight them, use them. They're yours. So we want you to really dig into the program. I also provided you with, and Renee stuffed all these in the back, I'll introduce her in a second, collections binder. So in here you'll see different resources. If you open up the placemat right in the front, you're going to see some information on our assessments, our digital, our program organization, and universal access for you to be able to reach all your learners. There's some brochures in here that just have some different information. On the back of the half-sheet brochure, there's a little preview guide, and so that's something if you want to share that with your principal or any teachers in your district. I'm going to be having you set up for full access, so you're going to be able to experience the whole program, but I can't do that for everybody, so we're just doing it for the pilot teachers. So other teachers or administrators can go on this evaluation site that's on the back of this brochure. And then you'll see some other pieces through here that are going to be showcasing some of the components we have. Have any of you ever seen Carol Jago? Have you seen Carol Jago, the author? I have a letter from her. We also have the same big one up here. She is very involved with, obviously being one of our key authors, but she was also involved with writing Appendix A for the state review, and that's going to be in the back of the binder, so I want you to take a minute to look at that. Teachers are always asking me about novel units and about what comes with the program. So you'll see a component list here and then also a novel unit listing. We've got another novel listing, and then the last page here is your component digital guide for collections. So this is just a little resource binder for you. Put it under your pillow tonight and you could soak it all in. So with that, I want to introduce Ricardo Ruiz, is going to be your presenter today. He comes to us with a great, diverse background, teaching in different school districts throughout the state. And he's going to go ahead and take you on your journey. And then also we have Renee Sanborn in the back that you might see as we go forward with the pilot. She's my right-hand gal, so you'll be seeing some more familiar faces. So anyway, that's it. Ricardo, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks so much for being here this afternoon. I definitely can know that feeling after a full day of instruction to come in for a training. So I'll definitely be mindful of our time together, and I want to make the most out of the time that we have. So as we go through and sort of familiarize ourselves with the program, California Collections, please, if there are any questions that you have as we're going along, please let me know. If there are pieces you want to dive into a bit more as we're going through them, again, please let me know. I want you to really be able to get as much out of this as you can, as obviously you guys are going to really know what you're going to need in your classroom for your students. So please, if we need to deviate as we're sort of going through all this, I'm more than happy to do that. So in terms of what I'm hoping we're going to cover in the time that we do have together, one, I like to call it sort of like a Google Earth approach that we'll have. We'll sort of start high level, look at components, talk about the program structure, and then really from there we'll begin to sort of zoom in, actually look at a unit, what we call a collection in the program, and really try to put some meat on the bones and get a sense of that sort of instructional rhythm that you're going to find in the program there. So we'll start first sort of high level, looking at both the student and teacher resources. From there, we'll go in and look at the program organization, the structure. We'll move into looking at the instruction that you have, really look at, as I like to call it, that instructional rhythm. Assessment and intervention we'll be looking at as we're moving through the really the core instruction. We'll see how all of that really ties in. Being that this is our program 2, there is an integrated ELD component as well as a designated ELD component that we'll talk about as well. And then finally, and something that will sort of be woven throughout, or threaded throughout, is going to be the technology. We'll see how you can really, regardless of where you are on that spectrum of technology, if you're fully embracing it, you can approach this in a fully sort of, if you want to approach it completely digital, you can. You can also approach it completely, analog, pencil, paper approach if you like, or somewhere in between. So we'll be looking at the technology as we're moving through. If you look in those bags that you have, or if you begin to look at the materials, I think you're going to notice that this program is probably looking a bit different than what you're used to in the past. And I think in many ways, this is reflective of the California framework and the 5 themes that are covered in that framework there. And so in your sample bag, and what we'll start out with is sort of going with Google Earth, sort of start high level. You should have something called a quick start pacing guide. And so if you could pull out that quick start pacing guide and turn to page 4 on it, this will take you right into a 2-page spread which goes over just the program philosophy and how the program addresses and hits on these 5 key themes in the framework. So on program 4 in your quick start pacing guide, and actually I'll pull this up here real quick. It should take you to the program philosophy page. And what you're just going to see here is how the program is really trying to hit on and address those 5 key themes of the framework. A lot of this we're going to be going through and looking at sort of in sort of real time or as we go through the program. But I did just want to call out up front how the program is hitting on many of those shifts that have flowed from the framework itself. But if you go just past those pages there, so starting on page 6, so just past those program philosophy pages, you will land on your key components and features page. And I think here we can take a moment and actually talk about the components that come with the collections program. So let's start by talking about what the student receives with the collections program. Students are going to have a hardbound student edition, and we'll come back to this and talk about not only its size. I think one big something that right off the bat I think you can tell it's much smaller than what we're used to in the past. But students will have their student edition hardbound. They'll also receive a close reader. This is a color consumable piece where really students are going into. They're going to find paired selections, and they're going to really apply the skills and strategies that they're learning through their student book itself. So these two are very much related, and one is really for application, the other is more for instruction. And then finally, students will also have a performance assessment workbook. This is also a color consumable piece, and this provides students with additional practice with new selections doing different performance assessments outside of what you'll find in the core program. So those are your 3 core student pieces. They have their student edition, their consumable close reader, and their consumable performance assessment workbook. Now, when we turn to your resources, or the teacher resources, you're going to have your teacher's edition. And so your teacher's edition is actually going to integrate both the student book and their close reader. So you have one teacher's edition which sort of integrates them and really seamlessly puts them together. So where the close reader is paired with selections in the student book, you'll find them in your teacher edition come right after that. So you're not going to be pulling from 2 different resources. You're going to have one teacher edition. You're also going to have a teacher's guide to your performance assessment, to the student performance assessment workbook. And then for you middle schoolers, you will have the language workshop. So I believe you'll have a sample in your sample bag. But the language workshop is going to be that designated ELD piece. So we'll talk about that a bit more when we talk about the integrated ELD, and we'll talk about how that designated piece also ties in there. But in terms of your teacher resources, you have your teacher's edition, a teacher's guide for the language workshop, as well as a teacher's guide for that performance assessment workbook. All of those pieces that you have in print are available online, so you can access them digitally. there are also additional pieces that are online only. So all of the print materials that you have that come with the program are accessible online, and then we'll see that there are some additional pieces that come with the program that are going to be online only. There are interactive lessons on writing and speaking and listening, and those are solely online or in digital format. Yeah?
Those extra texts online, can you make a class copy for students? Say you don't have access to computers those days. Could you have kids actually have a piece of paper and maybe print out a PDF
Of the
extra texts you mentioned?
Of the core student books, I don't believe.
Like if it's only PDF or only like a.
Because your student book and your teacher edition are both in ebook format.
I'm just saying like a conversion of like digital to paper computerized.
Yeah, I know that there are a lot of ancillary components that you have that are in PDF that easily are just you can print them off, but the core materials are in an ebook format, and they don't really lend themselves to printing. Yeah, and I'm going to be, when you're going through the program, I'm going to have I'll have the ebook projected and be going through it up here. And we can explore that a bit, but off the top of my head, I want to say that it doesn't really lend itself to printing pages off like a PDF document would. But yeah, so we can sort of look at that when we get on there. There may be sort of like a workaround to that. But in terms of the sort of your ancillary pieces, very easy to just sort of run additional copies off of those. All right, so let me jump back in here and we'll sort of begin to zoom in a little bit, moving from talking about the components and pieces that you have to now talking about the organization and the structure of the program itself. So if you could, go ahead and turn to, in that Quick Start Pacing Guide, if you could turn to page 16 in there. Page 16 in your Quick Start Pacing Guide should take you to a page that says Year at a Glance. And so you are looking at sort of like a bird's eye view of the collections program at your grade level spread across an academic year. And I just want to take a moment and pause here to talk about how the program itself is organized. So at each grade level, you're going to find collections is organized into 6 thematic or topically based units, and each one of those units is called a collection. So what you're going to find is in each one of those collections, you're going to find a variety of selections that are going to orbit around that larger theme or topic. So for example, in grade 8, your first collection or your first unit is culture and belonging. And so the variety of texts that students will be exposed to, both contemporary, historical, media as text, so different types of text, and really a diverse authorship that they will be exposed to. The common denominator is going to be that larger theme or topic there, which is going to allow for students to really engage in those text-to-text comparisons, engage in broader discussions and collaborative opportunities as they're moving through that. On page 16, what you're looking at is the start of your pacing and planning pages. And I think that we'll take a moment to go through here just because you're going to need to probably make some discretionary decisions when you approach instruction. Not only just in terms of over the course of the pilot, but just in general, anytime you approach a program, you need to have that wiggle room or that flexibility to make those discretionary decisions around what's absolutely necessary or essential to cover, what would be nice to cover if we have time, and so on. And so what you find there at that Year at a Glance, and I'll pull it up here so we're looking at the same thing. We get a nice bird's eye view of the program sort of paced out over the course of the academic year. So take a moment and look at those collection themes there, and also notice if there is a novel that is suggested for that collection. Most of the grade levels are going to have 2 novels suggested. I think there might be a grade level that just has 1 novel, but most of them are going to have 2 novel suggestions. And so you'll see there, when you're looking at those collections, you'll see the collection topic or theme. And then at the bottom of that green box, if there is a novel suggested, you'll see that listed. Along the top, you're going to see different benchmark or different assessments that are paced out across the year. And then along the bottom, you're going to see that language workshop, that designated ELD piece if you're in middle school. Along the bottom, you'll see the language workshop paced out alongside the core program. Because there is a connection between those two that we'll talk about. And so that's why at the year at a glance, you see that language workshop paced out there. So from there, if you turn the page just past your year at a glance, you will land on the core content overview pages, or the start of the core content overview. And we'll take a minute or two for you to look over each of those units or each of those collections. And I'm not sure if you've already identified a collection or a unit that you're going to pilot in the program, but I think that here's a chance for you to look sort of high level at all of the pieces or the components that make up each of the collections in the program. A couple things to note here in terms of what you're looking at. Along the top, it's going to provide the suggested pacing for that unit. So they're going to sort of all average or orbit around 30 days. Some are a little less, some may be a little more. But you'll see that suggested pacing there. And then all the different pieces of that collection will be listed. The top box is going to be all of your selections, or all of the text that students are going to be reading. Each one of them will list the suggested time that is allocated to that selection. So you're going to have short, medium, and long selections. If a selection is an anchor text, it will be noted there. And we'll talk more about the importance of those anchor texts. In the center, that center box, these are going to be your interactive lessons. And your interactive lessons are specific to writing, speaking, and listening. So if you're looking for opportunities to directly hit on those writing standards and those speaking and listening standards, your interactive lessons are the place to find that. And they can be used in a couple of different ways. We'll talk about that. Those interactive lessons are going to be tied directly to the collection performance tasks, which are housed at the bottom box under assessment. So when you're looking in that top box, you'll notice your anchor texts are going to be noted. Most collections are going to have 2 anchor texts. You'll see that some may just have 1. The number of anchor texts that you have are going to match the number of performance tasks that you have in that unit or that collection. So if you have 2 anchor texts, you're going to have 2 collection performance tasks. And the reason for that is that the performance task and the anchor text are related. So depending on the type of anchor text that the student is reading or that the class will be reading, that is going to affect the type of performance task that the student will complete. Because that performance task is going to use the anchor text as a model or a mentor text. So the students will be referring back to it. The performance task and the interactive lessons on writing, speaking, and listening are also very much related. So the performance tasks will reference the interactive lessons as a way to provide support for students who may need that support around writing or speaking and listening in order to complete that performance task successfully. So the performance tasks, you can think about using the interactive lessons as before you go into the performance task, or you can use the interactive lessons as you see fit. You know, if you want to use them sort of as an opportunity for more direct instruction around those standards, you can do that, or you can tie them very much to the completion of the performance task. And we'll see that as we go in and dive into the actual program and take a look at the instruction there. So the core content overview pages here, I think, are really helpful in identifying all of the different components that make up the unit or the collection. And this is where I say that these pages I find to be helpful if you are needing to make those decisions around, say you find the unit that you are wanting to pilot or the unit that you're wanting to cover here. But you notice that it says 32 days and maybe you only have 28. This is when you're going to probably want to begin to look at, okay, what pieces are going to be absolutely necessary and essential to cover, and what are some pieces that I can maybe cross out to get some extra time back. And so these core content overview pages, we're going to keep this quick start pacing guide close by because we're going to come back to that when we get into the TE. But at the beginning of every unit, we're going to see that you also have something called an instructional overview. And I think that that resource taken with your quick start pacing guide, specifically the core content overview, I think is a really good starting point to really look at all of the different instructional pieces, and then for you to be able to make those, ultimately, those discretionary decisions around, okay, what are the necessary components to cover so that I hit on all the necessary instruction, and then what are just sort of like the cherries on top that if we had the time it would be great to cover, but maybe aren't seen as crucial. So we'll come back to that quick start pacing guide, but I really do think that up front in there, that year at a glance, along with these core content overview, are really helpful in terms of starting out and getting a sense of just all the different pieces and how they relate in the program. All right, any questions before we jump into our TE and begin to sort of further zoom in and explore the program? All right, so let's go ahead and, if you could, go ahead and grab your teacher's edition from your sample bag, or if you have it on your table, open up to page 216. And that's going to be at the front of the book. It actually precedes the pages one, or the start, page 1. So it'll come before all of that. You'll find all your T pages. But T16 is going to be the start of your teacher's edition, or your table of contents, I'm sorry, in your teacher's edition. All right. So here in your table of contents, your teacher edition table of contents, I think this is where you can begin to see how your TE and that close reader is integrated. So notice how each of your collections starts out. They're always going to start out with an anchor text. Because as the name implies, really, that is what's going to anchor the unit. So the majority of your units or collections are going to have 2 anchor texts. And they really are the weight of that unit. Each of those anchor texts are going to really, where all of the instruction is sort of based around. So those anchor texts are going to be your crucial pieces. So as you are thinking about perhaps maybe some selections that aren't absolutely necessary to cover, you're going to want to look outside the anchor text. So your anchor texts are going to be crucial elements of that unit to cover, just because so much of the instruction is really anchored around them. And we'll see that as we move through a bit. Every anchor text is going to have a paired selection in the close reader. So here I have collection 1 in grade 8. And after each of my anchor texts, I can see that my student's going to go into their close reader, where they're going to really have a chance to apply the skills and strategies that they've just learned, that they just received through that instruction. But you may also notice that there may be another close reader piece tied to some of the other selections. So just make note of that as you're moving through those collections, the way that that's sort of designed or organized there. But I think here you also get a sense of just the variety of selections that students will be exposed to, as well as the diverse authorship that they will encounter. And then you'll see that each of your collections are going to end with those performance tasks. And so when we get into the program a bit, you also have performance tasks for every selection. So every one of these selections are going to come with their own smaller performance task, which really can help build up to the larger performance task at the end, but they're not absolutely necessary. But if you are looking for some enrichment or opportunities to extend out a lesson, those smaller or shorter performance tasks can really come into play or be helpful there. So let us go ahead and let us sort of jump into a unit. So take a minute to look through your 6 units or your 6 collections. Hopefully there's one in there that you're attracted to a bit or you're gravitating towards. But find that unit that you would like to explore. And I'd like for you just to take note of the page number for the collection opener. So at the top left, you'll see some page numbers listed in black here. You'll see collection opener. So if you choose collection 1, you're in luck, it's just page 1. But if you choose any of the later collections, just make note of that page number there. And I'm going to have everyone, we're going to all jump to the beginning of your collection, or the beginning of your unit. And we're going to really get a sense of that instructional rhythm. So we'll start seeing, how does your collection start? And how do the units open up? What type of instructional support do you have before you go into a selection, and so on. So I'll give you a minute to find that collection opener page number, and then we're going to go ahead and jump over to that. So once you turn to your collection opener, you should be greeted with a large image, the title of that collection, so your topic or theme will be listed. And then you should have a quote. So every collection is going to open up this way. You'll have a picture, the theme or topic, and a quote. If you turn the page just past that, you will land at your first planning page, and this is your planning page for your collection opener. Again, you'll see that image and the quote, or your image and your collection topic or theme that you saw on the previous page, as well as some additional information. So let's sort of talk about what's on this page here, and talk about really the purpose of your collection opener. You're going to find some different options that you have available to you in terms of how you can introduce the topic or theme of that unit. The first is you have something called a stream to start video, which is sort of like a little animated movie trailer which introduces the topic or theme of that collection. You have an opportunity to preview the performance task of that collection, or multiple performance tasks. And I've always thought of the performance task as sort of like the lighthouse of a unit. It gives a sense of direction in terms of where the students are going to be going, and really answers the question of, well, what's the point of all of this instruction that I'm going to be receiving? And so you have an opportunity to preview that up front and really address that question, as well as give them a sense of responsibility in terms of moving through that instruction and knowing what they're going to be expected to complete in the end. So along with that performance task, the academic vocabulary, one of the calls of the framework, you're going to see that introduced up front at the beginning of your unit as well. Students are going to be encouraged throughout the unit to incorporate that academic vocabulary in their instruction that they're receiving, and particularly at the end of the collection when they're completing their performance task. That academic vocabulary will be front and center in the prompts that are provided for the performance tasks. So really, the purpose of your collection opener is really just to open up and introduce the topic and theme of that unit, as well as highlight those performance tasks that students are expected to complete at the end of it. Now, what I really like about what's on the page there, or what you'll see on that page, is you should see some of these little icons on the student edition page in your TE. You'll see that little stream to start icon, an FYI icon, and then the Channel 1 News icon. Is anyone familiar with Channel 1 News, or has heard of Channel 1 News at all? It's sort of like a student-friendly news service. It's subscription-based. Actually, Anderson Cooper got his start at Channel 1 News, funny enough. But the nice thing about it is we have Channel 1 News is part of the HMH family, and for every unit or for every collection, you will have a Channel 1 News article piece, a video, that is tied to that unit topic. So for example here, and I'm just going to hover over my student edition page. From your teacher ebook, a nice thing to know is anytime you hover over something and you get the finger, it's a good thing. It means you're hovering over a resource of some kind. So anytime you hover over your student edition page in your teacher ebook, you can actually just click on it and it will open up the student edition booklet, so you can easily jump between your TE and your SE very quickly. But I want to just open up the student edition and so I can talk about those three icons there. I had already mentioned that you have that image and quote, and really the goal or the idea behind those collection opener pages are really to introduce the topic or theme of that unit. You also have a video if that is something that you prefer. So you have that Stream to Star video, which is sort of like an animated movie trailer. But for this particular unit, I find that the Channel 1 News article, or the Channel 1 News piece that comes with this collection is actually much more fitting. And what you'll find is this is actually a short video on immigration, and the collection theme is culture and belonging. And so I would think if I wanted to bring in a video that the Channel 1 News video is probably a bit more appropriate, or it would hit home, I think, a bit more to really get a discussion going around that theme and topic that they're going to be engaging with. So you have some different options that are available to you up front in terms of how you'd like to open up or introduce your unit. So I'm going to go back into my teacher edition. So your collection opener and this planning page is really about introducing the topic or theme. If we just go past your planning page here, you will see your English language support page. So this just provides some sort of high-level information around the type of support that you're going to have in the unit, specifically around EL support. So middle schoolers, you see at the bottom that it references the language workshop as well as some text and focus videos. There may be some strategies that are listed on that page there, as well as a professional development podcast or another professional development resource may be listed on your EL support page. But your EL support page at the beginning of your collection or the beginning of your unit is really just there intended to provide some high-level support around the entire unit or collection. And we're going to see as we get into the selections themselves that you're going to have EL support on almost all of your instructional pages in your teacher edition. So if you turn past your EL support page, you should land on a digital overview page. So I want to take a couple of moments to talk about this two-page spread that you see here, your digital overview. And then just past that, you have something called your instructional overview. Your digital overview is really just going to highlight all of the different digital pieces that you have in that collection. So if you're looking at your digital overview, if you look down that first column, you're going to see all of the selections that make up that collection or make up that unit. If you move across the rows, you'll then see some different categories there. And really what it's pointing out, again, is just specifically what are the digital pieces that you have available. So you'll have, for every selection, you're going to have an audio track that students can listen to that text or have it read to them. Yeah?
I noticed that, at least in one module, an anchor text is a novel. Would that be online? And then I saw that there were paired novels. Are those online too, if it's not an anchor text?
So when you say that there was a novel, were you saying in the...
Yeah, I was looking at module 6 for 6th grade where they have to read, yeah, the Mark Twain Prince and the Pauper. It says it's a novel.
Oh yeah, so this is going to be, and if we turn to that we can see, so this is actually in there, anything listed here is going to be in the core program. Okay. So those novels, remember when I had everyone get it, we started in the Quick Start Pacing Guide, and there was novels that were suggested in the Year at a Glance. So those are really meant to be outside of the program. So you're not going to see those novels referenced in any of the instructional pages. Really, what we like to say that, you know, the program is going to really help build stamina and endurance so that students can move through novels. But in terms of instruction, if you see a novel reference, that's going to be something that's in their core program and not the novel that may have been suggested in that Year at a Glance. Yeah?
And I'm just going to tag onto that too, because in your binder it's going to show you the novel list, and we have different packages available. So I know I had 2 districts today that decided to adopt collections, and they're doing 3 novels
Per student?
Yeah, so
Oh.
they went with the 8-year package, and so that's a thing that would be discussed with your review group and your district.
So it's extra to get packages that go with novels, but
No,
it's not
there's,
in
one
here.
of them comes with it, so it just depends on how many they want. Usually the standard one has 2 novels, but some districts can go for 3 per student, so that's a lot, yeah.
Okay, so just to
Yeah.
clarify what she was asking, so if we're looking at a unit, like I'm looking at unit 2,
Mhm.
and, or I like her example of unit 6. So for unit 6, it says it's an anchor text. So I think what you were asking was, is that in their textbook?
Is it online?
Or is it online?
Oh yeah. So yeah, very good question. Where it says anchor text, that is just meaning that those particular selections are generally longer, are going to merit multiple reads, because many times with those anchor texts, they're going to be asked to go back in and reread sections of it. But primarily, and what we'll see when you move over to your instructional overview pages, just past that, you'll see that if you follow an anchor text all the way across the row from the instructional overview, you'll see that that's where all of your instruction is really going to happen.
Okay.
You're going to always have, well, let me go up here, and it's a little hard to see, so if you're looking at your instructional overview, for your anchor text, and all of your selections have a key learning objective, and that's really where the key learning objective is very much tied to the standards-based instruction that they're going to receive, and so we'll see that in a moment. But follow your anchor text across. You'll see there's that performance task. You're always going to have a vocab strategy, which is taught with your anchor text. Always are going to have a language convention or a grammar lesson that's tied to that. You'll see the type of EL support and differentiated instruction, and then there's a close reader piece. So the anchor text is always going to have all of those elements in every collection, in every grade level. So it really is the basis for delivering the instruction. And the other selections really reinforce that. But your anchor text are essentially just that. They're going to anchor all of your instruction. And so those are really the must-dos in terms of what to cover in a unit, because if you don't cover them, there's no guarantee that you're going to hit on all of the instruction that the unit was designed to cover.
So
yeah.
looking at the same thing, if we're looking at, for example, in mine, one of my anchor texts is a short story by Woodhouse, The Mixer, and then it has the close reader that goes along with that. And then right under that says Speech by George Graham Best. So what you're saying is like that speech right there is something that if I don't have time for you.
Yeah, if you don't have
additional, but it's not.
Yeah, and really the key is to follow that along. So in your instructional overview, to follow that along and to see, okay, if there was a grammar lesson, what was the grammar lesson? Or if you look at the vocab strategy, sometimes there might not even be a vocab strategy taught. So it might just be an opportunity to read another selection, maybe reinforce some skills they have, but those are going to be the ones that aren't going to be absolutely crucial. And so that's why I really think that those overview pages taken with that quick start pacing guide, I think really arm you with the information that you need to decide, what can I cut off of this in order to have time to get through it all. Yeah.
Okay, and I know, based on what you said, all of the anchor texts are included in either their novel, their book, or their workbook.
Mm-hmm.
What about the 2 paired novels that are recommended? Are those available online, or do you have to buy those?
So they're not. So you don't have to buy them because they're, as Nancy was saying, even the sort of entry package for collections will come with at least 2 novels per student. It's just dependent, and it's in your binders. The novel, the catalog, or the list of novels that you're able to choose from is in the binders that you have. Those are just suggested, and the suggestions are based on the theme. So, you'll see that you'll see the theme there, and they want to just suggest one based on the theme, but you may want to deviate from that. But in terms of, they're not available online. All of your instructional resources for the novels are online, but the novels themselves are not. And they would come, if you do decide to adopt, they come with, on year 1, they'll arrive. Yes.
2 novels per grade level or 2
Per
novels?
student.
Okay,
Per student per grade level, yeah.
Okay.
And so, yeah, you could do the same 2 for your entire class, or get a little creative with how you want.
You and the grade level kind of talk about it. Said,
Exactly, yeah.
These are the 2 that we want out of the list.
Yeah, and I've seen, districts, where the grade levels get together and they're like, let's try to get creative with the library we can create at grade, at this grade level.
This is what we have already.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at some other stuff.
Exactly. So, or if you want to just have a really huge set of 2 novels at that grade, you can also go that route. Because I know that my teacher really loved Animal Farm, which I never understood until college, but she had a huge set of those puppies. All right. So again, I like to start with the Quick Start Pacing Guide because I do think there is some really good info up front, and taken together with these overview pages, I think these can be really good starting places for you as you approach your planning around this pilot. I just want to say one more thing about your instructional overview. Under Teach and Practice, under your digital overview, under Teach and Practice, and we'll come back to some of these, but for your anchor text, you're going to see that there's a lot of support under that's available there. So that support is going to be found in your teacher edition under your Teach and Practice pages. And so we'll get into that, and you'll see that as you're moving through your TE, you move from planning pages to teach pages to practice and apply pages. So I'll talk a bit more about that as we get into that. But here you'll see for your anchor text, you have a lot of video resources. You have things that are called close read screencasts, which we'll see. You have another video resource called a texted focus video, which we'll also take a look at. One is meant to provide some additional support around close reading, and one is meant to provide some additional support for our ELs, where the focus here is on challenging parts of that text for those ELs. So really zooming in on elements of the language that's used there. So digital overview, it's just identifying all of your digital pieces. Instructional overview, I think, is more useful, or can be very useful when looking at it alongside the Quick Start Pacing Guide. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into a selection itself. So I'm going to jump into the second anchor text in collection 1 here. But if you just turn the page just past your instructional overview, you should land at the start of an anchor text. So you should land on a page that says Plan. It should say Anchor Text and then give you the title of that text. So we move from those overview pages where you first saw your digital overview, then your instructional overview, and if you turn the page just from that, you should land on a planning page for an anchor text. Because every unit, every collection is going to start, the first text will be an anchor text. A couple of things that you'll see here. You have a little snippet on why this text was selected. For your anchor text, you're always going to have a paired selection in the close reader, and that will be identified. On that page. And then at the bottom, you'll see something called the text complexity rubric. So that text complexity rubric, you'll see to the left that your standards are identified, or at least the standards that will be covered with that selection are identified there. But your text complexity rubric is really a tool that we provide for you because one of the calls of the framework was to identify with the selections that students are going to be reading those potential pitfalls that may be there. And then to sort of scaffold or to provide the appropriate scaffolding based on that. So your text complexity rubric is really a tool that's meant to be a part of that sort of overall task there. It will provide you with your Lexile level, so it'll give you that quantitative measure. But beyond the Lexile level, and what I have here for the late homecomer, I know that it's a 940. But beyond that, what the text complexity rubric will tell me is it's going to give me some qualitative measures that it will rank. And so I can see right off the bat from that text complexity rubric that the levels of meaning and purpose of this story, it's ranked pretty high. On that 4-point scale, it's ranked a 4. I can see that the structure of this particular selection is ranked really low. But if we turn just past that, so on the next page there, you will then see your text X-ray, and those same qualitative measures are sort of broken down even further and zoomed in on to provide some more information, a bit more in depth. So I can see that levels of meaning and purpose based on that text x-ray, that it looks like there's a lot of figurative language used in this selection. And so it's identifying that some areas that are going to be challenging for EL students. It's also pointing out some resources that are available that you can use to support students. But really, that text complexity rubric and that text x-ray, it's part of that integrated EL support that comes with the program. And it's really meant to provide you with some information that can help you sort of better approach the type of support that you provide to your EL students. So if we go past our text x-ray, we will move from our planning pages into our teaching pages. So every selection is going to start out this way. Every selection will have those planning pages with the text complexity rubric and the text x-ray, and that will always precede the start of each selection in the program. And so now we sort of arrive at the front door for the anchor text in that selection, or in that collection we're looking at. So a couple of things that I want to say at this point, because the idea here is with each of the selections that students are going to be moving through them and close reading those selections. So the way in which you approach the close read you could approach it a bit differently. You'll see in your TE that every selection is going to start out with a little bit of background information. Students are given a purpose which can help guide their reading there. But other than that, they're going to jump right into that anchor text. Now, your teacher edition, and if you notice in your sort of wraparound pages, you have these sort of light beige or tan boxes that are going to house your support or your close read instructional support. You're also going to notice that you have some EL support that's in some sort of lighter beige boxes as well. So if you sort of move through that selection there, or the anchor text that you're looking at, you'll see that that's where you're going to find your instructional support for close reading as well as your EL support. So the idea here is students are going to be close reading this anchor text, and your close read support is going to be in that teacher wraparound. Now I know what you're probably thinking, that, wait, I'm going to be exhausted if I do this with each one of my classes. And the goal here is not for you to be exhausted at the end of the day. We want them to be exhausted from having really tackled that text, read it, reread sections of it. So what you'll see in your TE is your instructional support for close read. But that's not the only way that you can approach it, and of course that's not the only way that it should be approached. You also have for every one of those, whoops, open up the wrong one. For every one of your selections, you will also have student-friendly guided close read questions that you can provide to your students so that they can go through that selection, close reading it, using these questions which was going to help sort of focus and guide them through that. So you have some flexibility in how you want to approach that close read. What I've found is a lot of times together in sort of whole group, the teacher will start out covering the background, setting the purpose, start them out on that close read, but then break them up into their reading groups and provide them with those student-friendly guided close read questions, which they can then complete the rest of the story in those groups. Now, the way that those close read questions, they're based on the key learning objectives of that selection. So you can see here in your TE that whatever is in that light beige box, whatever the focus of your close read instructional support, the questions that students have in those guided close read handouts, the focus is going to be around those key learning objectives. Because when we get to the end of this selection, we're going to see how that instruction ties in and how it uses the anchor text to really deliver that instruction. So we know that the texts that students are going to encounter in the program are going to be challenging and rigorous, and many times students will need some additional support getting through that close read. So depending on, one, how you want to approach the close read, and again, you have some flexibility in terms of whether you want to do that in more of a whole group or more of a small group type of, or even pairs. You can approach it however you like. I want to point out some of the support that students will have as they're moving through that anchor text. The first is something called that close read screencast that we saw referenced in our digital overview pages. So here I just have the student ebook pulled up here. And I want to show you in the actual ebook itself, as students are moving through the text, they will see right at point of use that close read screencast sort of referenced. And what we're going to see in here, and I want to pull up one of these and just play some of the close read screencast. What you'll see in here in that video is the close read screencast is going to zoom in on that very piece of text that students would be reading, and it's going to sort of break it down, and there'll be two students sort of talking through that piece of text there, really trying to model an effective close read protocol. So the close read screencasts themselves are meant to be some support for students to move through those selections, but they can also be a great way to provide some additional instruction around close reading. So I'll play this one here from the late homecomer in grade 8, so we can get a sense of what one of the close read screencasts looks like.
I was feeling a strong push to reinvent myself. Without my realizing, by the time high school began, I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach that I had been on simmer for too long. I wanted to bubble over the top and douse the confusing fire that burned in my belly. So what do you think she means by reinvent myself?
Well, she says she's beginning high school, so she'll meet new people and she can kind of change herself. You know, she can decide how she wants them to see her.
That phrase, pit of my stomach, makes me think she really feels this deeply, like this change is hard for her to ignore.
And she makes this great comparison. She's been on simmer too long and she wants to bubble over the top and douse the fire.
So douse means to put out with water. In this metaphor, it seems like she is the water in the pot.
Right, and now she wants to put out whatever it is, the confusion that she feels.
All these images of heat and burning give me the sense the narrator is uncomfortable and maybe looking for a way to stop that feeling.
But she also says, or else I wanted to turn...
I'm going to pause it there in the middle. But I think it gives a good sense of what the close read screencasts are trying to do. They're going to zoom in on pieces of the anchor text and model an effective close read protocol for students, just as we would do with a think aloud. And so in your digital overview, at the beginning of your collection, at the beginning of the unit, for each of the anchor text, it will reference those close read screencasts and point out, give you line numbers for where those close read screencasts are. So for example, this was the first one out of that anchor text, and it gives the line numbers for what part of the text it's focusing in on. So all of your anchor texts are going to have those close read screencasts. Many of them have multiple close read screencasts. And so you can always point your students to them if they are needing some additional support or if students are struggling with a close read. Parents are another, also really have so far really liked these different resources, because even for them the idea of a close read is not, it's sort of a new protocol that was sort of birthed out of the fact that a call for more challenging or more rigorous text for students at all grade levels. With that call, a new protocol for approaching those texts ultimately was born. So the close read screencasts can also be used as a time to deliver some instruction, and if you want to use them as sort of a whole group resource, there are separate worksheets that you can have students follow along in. So as they're watching the video, they can be annotating that same piece of text that is being annotated in the video. So you have some additional pieces that go along with them depending on how you maybe want to use them. For the middle school teachers, you're also going to have a video resource that's called the Text in Focus video. Just like the close read screencast, the Text in Focus videos are also referenced on your digital overview. They're also going to be pointed out in your TE wraparound. So as you're moving through an anchor text, on the page where that video is, it will be referenced in your teacher edition. But I want to show one of these Text in Focus videos. The purpose of them, different than the close read screencast, whereas that one is about modeling an effective close read. The Text in Focus video is a part of the integrated ELD support. So this is really intended for your EL students who are struggling with elements of the language used in that text. So this particular Text in Focus video is focusing in on figurative language. And so we'll see how this one is much more visual.
In this paragraph, the author uses some powerful images to describe her family situation. We sank our roots deep into the land, took stake in the ground, and prayed to the moon that one day the wind would carry us away from our old moldy house into a new stronger home that could not be taken away, that would not fall down on us, that would hold us safe and warm. So, wait, is she saying that her family actually has plant-like roots and can travel through the wind? No, not at all. But she's making a comparison between two different things. A family in a community and a growing plant. The author is literally, or actually saying, that her family settled into a community, but hoped that one day they might find a nicer, safer home in a better place. Yet by using the phrase sank our roots, she makes us think about the family settling into their new home, much like a growing plant's roots settle deep into the soil. She continues the comparison when she says we hoped the wind would carry us away, just like a seed from a growing plant that is carried to a spot where it can grow strong. So the author is giving some important facts about her family, and she's doing it by drawing.
So you can see these Text in Focus videos. I think they're really well done. They definitely are heavy on the visual side, to try to convey as much information as possible on that front. But again, they're there to support our ELs with challenging pieces of language that they will find in those anchor texts. And all of these video supports are referenced in your digital overview, which is really your guide for all of those digital and technology pieces that you have for that unit or collection there. So I'll get back into the teacher edition and sort of continue our journey getting a better sense of that instructional rhythm and really that instructional pathway through the program. So to sort of recap, we looked at the collection opener and the purpose of that, really introducing the topic or theme of that unit. Introducing the performance task as well as that academic vocabulary. From there, we see how we jump right into an anchor text. We talked a bit about that close read protocol, how you can approach it. It can be more teacher-led and whole group focused. You have that close read instructional support and your EL support in your TE. Or you have those downloadable, editable versions of those close read guided questions. So if you want to have students work in groups or in pairs moving through that selection, close reading it, you have the option to do that. But now let's look at where the instruction lies. Where is your standards-based instruction? We saw in the instructional overview that there is a vocab strategy taught, that there's a grammar lesson that's incorporated into those selections. So let us get to the end of the selection that you're looking at. So whatever that anchor text is that you were exploring, go ahead and thumb through the pages and get to the end of that selection. Now you'll know you're at the end. Well, one, the text will just end. But you're also going to know you've reached the end of your selection when you see collaborative discussion listed. So when you get to the point where you see collaborative discussion, both in your TE wraparound as well as on the student edition page itself, you know you've reached the end of that selection or anchor text. So at the end of every selection, students will have an opportunity to engage in a collaborative discussion. That collaborative discussion is going to be linked to the purpose that was set at the beginning of that selection itself. So many times the purpose will sort of help focus the students a bit in terms of what are the elements of that story or of that informational text that they should focus in on. Many times that will lead to the type of notes that they're taking. Then the collaborative discussion will sometimes pull from those notes that students may have been taking as they were moving through that. So you have that collaborative discussion piece that's going to end each of your selections. And when you go just past that page, this is where you're going to see the start of your instruction. So here you see your standards-based instruction. We see here these were the focus of your guided close read support. So as you were moving through that anchor text, what you saw in those light beige boxes in terms of the focus of that close read, when you get to the end, you'll have an opportunity to really revisit that to ensure that you've hit on that key learning objective. The examples here are going to be pulled from the selection that they just read. And so in 8th grade for collection 1, this particular anchor text, the focus was on analyzing the meanings of words and phrases and analyzing memoirs. When you go past that, here is your analyzing the text questions. These are your comprehension questions, but they're not the generic who did what to whom questions. All of the questions that you'll find in the analyzing the text section, these are going to all be text-dependent questions. So every one of these questions are going to ask the student to cite text evidence. Most of the time they're going to require the student to go back into the anchor text or go back into the selection and reread certain pieces of it. And then at the bottom of your analyzing the text questions, you will see that smaller selection performance task. So we have those larger collection or unit performance tasks. Here in the analyzing the text part of the instruction, you will see the smaller selection performance task listed. After you're analyzing the text questions, you'll find your critical vocabulary. So this is the vocabulary that is pulled from the selection that they just read. So students saw these vocab terms defined in the margins of their student edition as they were moving through the text. At the end, they're going to revisit them and have an opportunity to practice and apply. And so it's not your simple vocab list. Students many times are actually going to be asked to answer a question where that word is being used. So really the vocab lesson is a lesson where those vocab words are going to be taught in context, in the context of that story. And then below is where you have the vocab strategy, as well as an opportunity for students to practice and apply with that new strategy. And then finally, and what is sort of the bookend of your instruction, is always going to be your grammar lesson or your language conventions. So all of your anchor texts are going to have these same pieces. So if we think about the close read is really focusing students on those key learning objectives. So you have some flexibility of how you approach the close read, but the close read focuses on the key learning objectives, which is really tied to the standards that are being addressed with that selection. Once you complete the close read, students will move into more direct or explicit instruction around those standards. They will then have their comprehension in the form of those analyzing the text questions, all text-dependent questions. They then will move into their vocab lesson. They'll receive that vocab strategy. And then finally, they'll receive their grammar lesson, where the focus is going to be on a different language convention, which is going to very much flow directly from the text that they just read, because the examples are pulled from that text. So here, students were reading a memoir. So it kind of makes sense that the grammar lesson is focusing in on active and passive voice. You know, when you think about the type, well, a memoir, well, that kind of makes sense. So your language convention is going to be very much tied to that anchor text. And The language convention that's covered is going to depend on the type of selection it is that you just read. So before we look at where students would move from here. So if we think about this, we just went through an anchor text and look at the instruction that comes afterwards. Students at this point would move into their close reader, where they would then apply and reinforce those same skills and strategies that they just learned. But before I jump into the close reader and we take a look at that, I just want to mention that this is not your only place for hitting on grammar. So in the back of your teacher edition or in the back of your the student book that you have, there are pages that are called they're your resource pages. So they come at the end. They come right at the end, and I'm not sure if it'd be this. It's probably not the same page for everyone, but they're going to come really towards the far end. And if you hold your book to the side, you'll see that it really starts where that little dark mark starts. These are your resource pages. And the resource pages are actually quite helpful. You'll find that there are a lot of opportunities to hit on instruction outside of this more integrated type of approach. So grammar, you have opportunities to hit on grammar here if you look at your resource pages in the back. But there's also another place where you have opportunities to hit on grammar. Yeah?
I'm sorry, I'm just getting a little bit lost. Can you go over the structure again of, because I have written down you do your close read, then discussion questions, vocab, grammar, then you get to the close reader, but then there's a mini performance task.
Yeah.
I'm just confused as to when you do what with the different pieces.
Yeah. So if we back up and think about, we looked at the collection opener page, or how each collection opens up. And really, the purpose of those pieces there are really around introducing that theme or topic, because students, they're going to be in that unit for about 30 days of instruction. And so we introduce that topic or theme. We can bring in some of those videos as a part of that overall discussion about introducing the topic. We have the performance task preview up front. So if you'd like to preview that performance task and talk about what's going to be involved in that performance task, you can do that up front, as well as introducing that academic vocabulary. So really, the start of a unit is around really priming and prepping the students for what they're going to encounter as they move through the unit. From there, we went into the anchor text, because your unit is always going to start with an anchor text selection. And we started by talking about what are students going to be doing here. What is the activity they're going to be doing in terms of when we get to that anchor text, what's their role at that point. And the whole idea is the goal is for them to be close reading the selections in the program. And so I had said you have some flexibility around that close read, how you want to approach it. You can lead the close read, and you have in your TE and your wraparound all of those close read support, which will help you sort of guide them through the close read. But if you're finding that is, if the burden is on you, if you're finding that it really turns into you reading it, you have the other option of printing out the close read questions, which can help students, or which can guide students through that selection and focus their close reading of it. So, or you could do a blended approach, and what I've seen with the pilots that I've done visits on is generally this teacher will start them out, and then they'll have them go into reading groups, and they'll use those printouts, and they'll finish it off that way. So they close read, or they read that selection, and then that's when we got to the end here, where we move into your more direct instruction. So at this point, you're probably bringing everyone back together, and you're going to hit more directly on the key learning objectives. So as they were close reading, those questions were helping focus on these elements. And so when you get to the end, you're just going to reinforce that and hit on that again. From there, this is where you move more into, your instruction will continue after this. So you move from, you make sure that those key learning objectives were really hit on and addressed and really are solidified with the students. You then move into some practice and apply. This is where These are their comprehension questions. They're all text dependent. So they're going to go back into the text, reread some lines, cite text evidence, something that, a skill that they're going to definitely need in the springtime. So your comprehension questions here. I had said that this is where, if you are wanting to do it, you have a smaller selection performance task. So this is something that when we looked at that core content overview page, and we saw all the different components of the unit, and it gave us suggested pacing for each one of those pieces. This wasn't included in that pacing. So this is something that if you find you have a group of students who blast through a close read and are sort of sitting around waiting for something to do, and you have the majority of your students who say are maybe struggling with it a bit more, this is a great opportunity to have them maybe complete that performance task, but then you can support those other students, finish that close read with them. So this is really an optional piece, that performance task there. Really the key here is we want students to really be able to cite text evidence, and so here's your opportunity to hit on that. You then will always have a vocabulary element, so a vocab lesson for every anchor text. You're always going to have one of these. And this vocabulary is pulled directly from the selection. So it's really a vocab lesson where the vocab words are taught in context. And then you're always going to provide them with a vocab strategy, which they can then use to break down any new words that they may encounter. And then finally, we have the bookend of, what acts as the bookend for instruction with our anchor text. It's the grammar lesson. So every anchor text, you're going to have that same instructional rhythm. And really, for every selection, the goal is for them to be close reading it. But for every anchor text, you're always going to have those same instructional pieces. You're going to hit on the key learning objectives. From there, you're going to move in to that comprehension piece, vocab, and then grammar. So all anchor texts will have that same flow. And then students will move into their close reader. So if you sort of think about it, the student book, it's really more about this is more about a sort of more direct instruction. It's more you at the steering wheel and guiding the students through it. There's obviously a whole lot of flexibility depending on your students' ability in terms of how you approach that instruction from the student book. But once you move through all those pieces, and you wrap up with that grammar piece, students will then be moving into the close reader, their consumable close reader. And in your teacher edition, you'll move directly into that close reader paired selection. But this is where students will have an opportunity now to apply what it was that they just learned in that instruction piece with a new selection. So they're going to read a new selection. It's going to be chunked though. So the directions that they're given in their close reader are going to have them read chunks of the story, annotate as they're going along, reflect on what they read, write about what they read. But it's really their opportunity to apply all of those skills that they just learned and really reinforce it to them or for them. So does that help clarify a bit the sort of how those pieces sort of tie in? And I know sometimes it can get a little confusing too with we're talking about close reading the anchor text, and then we say they get in there, they move into their instruction, and then they're going to move into their close reader. But really this is, and I've seen this also used in different ways where it was assigned sometimes for homework. Teachers, I've seen pilot teachers have them start it in class, finish it at home. But it's really a place for them to more independently close read a text and independently annotate and mark up that text. When they're in their student book, they're being guided in terms of what they should focus on. And here they are given some guidance, but it's really where we want to give them sort of a safe place to practice and apply. And so that's what the close reader will do. It's really their place to reinforce what it is they're learning in the core student book itself. Any questions thus far? Yeah.
Is there like a PDF of the close
Yes.
reader? Can't find it.
Let me.
Or if you know what I should click on. Couldn't find it in teacher resources.
And you're gonna all get full access to this too, so, are you on the evaluator account right now?
Whatever was emailed. Like I've been.
He's on Zoom.
Yeah, like I can admin probably now.
Okay, yeah,
Sort of
because
thing.
we actually put in for full access for you, so Marco's gonna go over that afterwards, so it might not show up on the evaluator.
Like I
account.
can't create classes.
No, but on the full access
Right.
you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, so
that.
you'll be able to have all of that too. And we actually were offering to set up, I asked the district last week if I could get your class rosters, and I just got them today. So we can do that, but it takes the people doing it, it's a manual input, so it might be a few days to get
We're looking for
anyone who
after
wants to do
spring
it.
break.
Okay, is that when you're starting?
No, that's because I have students in.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, I was gonna say, a note on that is, I switched textbooks with another teacher at my school, so if you're looking for rosters, I'm not signed up for this one.
So I think. So the reason, and the close reader, and this is why you're not finding the close reader listed separately, is that it's actually integrated in the student ebook. So if you're on that dashboard,
In the student ebook. not-
or in your teacher ebook too, but if you're looking just for the student, because
The reason is because I happen to have 9 here for some reason, just because what was given to me, but I need a 10 to kind of compare the two.
oh yeah, so
So I'm just curious if there's like a digital.
yeah, so if you open up, if you open up the, if you want to look at the, your teacher edition pages of that, you can do that through your teacher ebook, or if you just want to look at the close reader from the student edition of the close reader, just pull up your student ebook, and your student ebook is going to incorporate them in just like your TE is. So if you are looking, just find the collection you're looking at, and then you'll see that the close reader pieces are going to be identified in your contents.
All right, I found it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not exactly the same, but it's really, really close.
All right. So I had. Do we feel good about that sort of instructional, the flow of the instruction so far? And this will sort of, if you think about what we covered up until this point, talking about the anchor text, the instruction that comes after it, and then the opportunity to practice and apply in their close reader. That protocol will sort of continue throughout the unit. So I like to sort of say it's sort of like a rinse and repeat method, where the idea is in their student book, they are working through those texts, applying the close read protocol, receiving instruction, moving into their close reader to apply and reinforce all of those skills, and they sort of rinse and repeat that process. If you are looking, as I was saying, for additional opportunities to hit on, say, grammar instruction, you'll find them at the back of of your student booklet, also in the back of your TE, but they're going to be under your resource pages. You'll find opportunities to directly hit on different language conventions, for example, but to do it in a more to do it outside of a selection reading. So I think one of the big shifts is, I think we all, it wasn't that long ago, but it was the reading program, your writing program, your grammar booklet. They were all sort of separated out, and now what we have is a very sort of integrated approach to it all. But I do want to let you know that you also have additional opportunities to hit on that. So if you want to look at vocab or grammar and do it in a more isolated fashion, in your resource pages you'll find opportunities to do that, as well as online under your teacher resources. You'll find something that's called grammar notes. And does anyone remember the Warner's famous English grammar and composition booklet? All of the lessons that were in Warner's grammar and composition you have available to you in PowerPoint format, and they're called grammar notes. So if I click here on grammar notes, I'll just pull it up so that you'll see all of these different lessons. But you'll see all of you have, I think for middle school, how many do they give us? 26 lessons and then some additional components. So there are, you have a lot of additional opportunities for grammar if you like. You have you have your resources in the back of your teacher edition or student edition. You have the grammar notes, which are PowerPoints that are based off of Warner's Grammar and Composition. And for each one of these PowerPoints, there are handouts that go along with them. So if you do want to hit on, or you find the need to address a grammar or a language convention sort of more directly, you have handouts that go along with this. So you have some practice that students can complete after going through that lesson. So there, you do have a lot of other options outside of the core instruction that you'll see in the program, because I know that this is one of those big shifts that has come with the new standards and framework. All right. So, any questions before we jump to the end of a unit or the end of a collection to look at the performance task there and then to talk about assessment a bit? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the end of this unit.
Oops. Real quick question.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of online integration in terms of like Google Classroom? I use Google Classroom a lot, so I'm just kind of curious if there's any overlap or any usability.
Yeah,
We actually have a partnership with Google and approached Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt, and I was at a big event a couple weeks ago that Dr. Joel Revin from your district attended also. So they want to partner with us, so we're going to be doing some things going forward with Google and Google Classroom with this program specifically with collections. So I don't have all the information yet, but we have a digital learning team that's going to be working on that together, and then a content specialist will be involved in that. So that will be coming soon, actually.
So it might look like a placeless assignment to your Google Classroom sort of thing.
Yeah, because I know that right now we have something called the HMH Player, which is an app that was developed very closely with Google. It runs on Chromebooks, on any full version of the Chrome web browser, and it's also an iPad app. But that really allows for all of our program content to be housed in an app environment, which is great for districts that have some security issues. That going through a browser, sometimes there's issues with pop-up, just a lot of issues there. So the app, I think, is a stabler environment there. But really, the benefits from the teacher side are that it's just easy to navigate all of your resources and access everything from the app itself. Just like how easy it is to pay your friend, what you owe for dinner last night through, your mobile banking app. But
so it looks like a portal, but only with those icons.
Yeah, and actually, I can pull it up for you.
Reminder too,
Currently, right now, there's you can plug a lot of your resources from Google Classroom into the player, and so I'll log into it here, and you'll get you'll see the layout of the app.
So on the inside folder of your binder is going to be the new brochure that we actually just got yesterday for the player app. And as Ricardo was saying, it's actually, I like to use the word revolutionary because it's something that nobody has. One of the districts I represent in the Valley is Ceres Unified, and they actually have students that live like in migrant farm, sheds that don't even have electricity, some of them, but they're a one-to-one school district, and they're able to have the students do their work, and then when they come back into Wi-Fi, it syncs back up again. So you'll be able to see that player information in the inside folder of your binder there too.
Yeah, and I was going to say, here's the app dashboard for a grade 8 ELA class. But it's very sort of an easy design in terms of if you are needing to create an assignment or modify or create a lesson, you can do that quickly from your dashboard. If you click on View Your Library, it very easily pulls up all of your core components, all of your teaching aids, as well as gives you easy access to assessment and some other pieces there. So it's a really nice sort of layout and design, but I think what's probably most exciting is that I'm sure we all have found or created certain materials over the years that, that we hold near and dear, that the HMH player allows for you to create or customize existing lessons or create your own lessons from scratch and then push those out to students. So say you're teaching an anchor text, but you found something that really goes in and fits with that. You can sort of modify a lesson, add that resource that you have or you've created or found to that particular lesson there. And so you can really customize the lesson, the pre-built lessons of the program, if you like. So currently right now it's you know, those features are available. As Nancy was saying, you know, that down sort of in the pipeline, we're really excited about that partnership just because I think Google, I mean, I've heard them talk about, you know, Google Classroom is the sort of the framework of the house, and you know, you need the furniture in there to make it sort of accommodating. So, but yeah, the app I think is a great resource to sort of pull all of those different teaching components in a sort of an easier layout than going online.
So for the short term, though, we're probably looking at more like a browser portal, right? Since we're probably not going to look at the app within 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. So everyone with your pilot accounts, you will log in and you'll be taken to your teacher dashboard here. And really, I would say that probably over the course of your pilot, the focus is you're going to probably be focusing in on your tiles here, these what we call the resource carousel. I would definitely encourage everyone to explore your teacher resources tile. This is where you're going to find a whole host of resources, from not only from PDFs of say like your language workshop resource, which we'll talk about when we talk about assessment. But you'll also see your Quick Start Pacing Guide and some other resources. If you're needing to have access to them, you'll find them here. But really, your teacher resources are where you're going to find a whole host of resources, videos, tutorial pieces. So it's really, I think, I would encourage you to explore those pieces there. Some of these components will be listed in your instructional pages or in your planning pages. They may list some of these pieces. But I think one of the things that I had said that everything in print is available online, but there are some things that are online only. One of those online only pieces are going to be these interactive lessons. So these interactive lessons, and I'll open them up here. These are going to be your interactive lessons on writing, speaking, and listening. So if you're looking for an opportunity to directly hit on those standards, your writing and speaking and listening, your interactive lessons are where you're going to find the instruction around that. Now, let me pull up my teacher ebook again and talk about how those interactive lessons are tied into the performance tasks. At the end of your unit, at the end of a collection, this is where you're going to find those larger collection performance tasks. And I had said that the collection performance tasks use the anchor text as a model or a mentor text. So here's an example of one of those performance tasks. This is from collection 1 in grade 8. They are tasked with writing an informative essay. And so it lists that their mentor text is going to be the first anchor text of that unit. Students will move through that performance task in 4 different stages here. But I just want to point out that up top at your performance task, this is where those interactive lessons are mentioned or referenced. So when you get to the end of a unit or the end of a collection, you can naturally go over those interactive lessons on writing, speaking, and listening as you're covering the performance task itself, because you'll always see that the writing and speaking and listening lesson that's connected to this unit is going to be based on the performance task that students are being asked to complete. So there's that connection between the two. So it may just feel natural to cover that interactive lesson on writing, speaking, and listening when you're going over the performance task. but there's nothing that's binding you to that. If you want to address your writing and speaking and listening separately, you can do that as well. But just know that there is that connection between the anchor text, the performance task, and the interactive lessons on writing, speaking, and listening. So your performance students will go through that four-step process: planning, producing, revising, and finally presenting. And so for every performance task, you will also have a rubric for each one of them. The rubrics you can find online under your teacher resources in an editable format if you'd like to modify them. But these performance tasks are going to be separate from the performance task or the performance assessments that you'll find in here. So in here, you have opportunities for 4 other performance tasks or performance assessments. The selections in here, they're essentially going to be cold reads. Bless you. So students will have not encountered the selections in here. So if you're looking, this can be you can almost use this as like a type of benchmark if you like. But it's really a chance for them to complete a task using selections that they have not seen yet. Whereas in here, these performance tasks use an anchor text that they've read already as a model or mentor text. All right.
Real quick question, the interactive lessons, do students have access to that in their portal?
Yes.
They'll be able to go at their pace?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So that's a really good question. Because, obviously if you want to approach it as and handle it in more as a whole group direct instruction, you want students to you want to go through it with the entire class, you can do that. But you notice that the tile for interactive lessons is yellow. The yellow tiles are actually student-facing tiles. So when students log into their dashboard, they will have those 3 yellow tiles, and then they will have those purple tiles, which are just support or some resources that... So yes, the answer is they will have access to those interactive lessons. So if, say, you aren't hitting on them in class as a whole, but you're finding that there are some students who need some additional support maybe before completing a performance task, or just need some additional support around writing or speaking and listening, you can bring them in, or you can assign them or have students go to them on their own and use them as a type of additional support resource or a type of intervention.
And you can show you checks off that they've completed the
Yeah.
interactive lessons.
Yeah, and so when you sort of assign it or push it out to them, you'll be notified once they complete it. But yeah, that's a good question, because you may just, or even parents may want to access some of those to really help support students that are struggling with some of these in some of these areas. So they will have access to that. And if you want, when you are online, you can easily jump into their student resources and then just look at what they would have access to. Your resource list is much longer, but they'll have access to a good amount of resources as well. And depending on how far into the digital side of things you get in the course of the pilot, if you get to the point of really exploring and assigning different pieces out, you'll see that a lot of these resources you can push out or assign to students. So, if you are wanting to, say, push out a text and focus video for a student who needs some extra support, or push out a level up tutorial, which is really going to reteach the skills and strategies that a lesson covers. Those level up tutorials are an interactive sort of way to reteach them. So all of them can be assigned out. You can also use them as instructional tools in whole group. Students can access them on their own, just as sort of like additional support. So there are different ways that a lot of those pieces can be used, since many of them are both teacher and student facing. All right, so almost towards the end, I want to talk about the language workshop and how it ties in with the core program itself. Now, your language workshop, and I think maybe it's sort of taking a step back and talking about the call of Program 2 and the requirement to have both an integrated ELD component as well as a designated ELD component. Now, your integrated ELD, what we saw as we were moving through your teacher edition, and I was pointing out that in the margins, or in your teacher wraparound, you saw your beige boxes where your EL support is. So as you're moving through your teacher edition, your integrated ELD, or that integrated EL support, is going to be found on your instructional pages. So the integrated ELD, the idea there is really about having the content be front and center, and your integrated ELD support is having that language support in the background. Your designated ELD is really your protected time, where front and center is going to be language, and in the background it's going to be sort of the content. So the language workshop is a teacher's guide. And so what students will be taking to that designated ELD time isn't a separate workbook, but rather students will just be taking their actual student materials with them, and this will be the basis for receiving additional instruction around language development. So your language workshop, and actually I'll pull up the PDF of it so we can see. So your language workshop, and here's a table of contents of the language workshop. Your language workshop is going to be broken up into lessons, which are 5-day lesson plans. And the way that it works, or the way that you would read your contents, is the first item listed in the lesson is going to be the content that is being used to deliver the instruction. So the first lesson, the content is the collection opener itself. If you look at lesson 2, the content is the anchor text. Or if we move to lesson 3, I can see the content is another text, or another selection. And we saw at the beginning of your Quick Start Pacing Guide that when we saw that year overview, or that year at a glance, along the bottom it listed the language workshop, each lesson of the language workshop all along the bottom. So each lesson is 1 week. It's a 5-day lesson plan. And in the table of contents, and I wish they would have labeled it a little bit better, but like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and selection. But that's how you're going to read it. The first item listed is your content, and then each of the next items, that's each of your days. So I'll use this anchor text example. Lesson 2, students are taking their student book with them, and they're going to be going back into their anchor text that they're reading in their core program. We're going to use that anchor text to go in and focus in on a language lesson. And so it's always going to be day 1 will be collaborative, day 2 is an interpretive, day 3 we get into the mechanics of how English works, day 4 they get a strategy, and then day 5 they're producing language. Yes?
So is it not necessary that they have completed the text first? It's just used as a device to explore the language?
Yeah, so it's not necessary that they maybe finish the text. So the lessons are paced out, or they're aligned to the core instruction in the program, where the idea is that they would first have their ELA class, then they would go into their designated time. But it's not going to be absolutely, and usually the core class is going to be ahead of the language workshop. And so they're going to go back into that anchor text, but and if you go in and look at one of the lessons, really the focus is it's very focused. They're not going to reread that anchor text, because that's not the point of the designated time. They may go in and read a few lines and spend that whole day focused on just those few lines, breaking apart that language. So it's not going to be necessary that if they're going back into that anchor text but they haven't finished the story yet, that won't be, it won't affect the instruction because of just how focused it is. And really they're just using they're using the content here, or pieces of it, to really sort of zoom in and give a deeper lesson around language or around those standards specifically. So your language workshop, students are taking their core program material with them to that designated time, and the teacher's guide provides additional or instruction specific to those ELD standards. So really language is front and center here, whereas in the core program, language is in the background, and that's what that integrated ELD support is. All right. Any questions? How are we feeling? I don't see steam coming out of the ears. That's good. Let me actually close some of these tabs because I get anxious when I have too many tabs open. All right.
When I opened up the English language support, it wasn't exactly the same thing, but I did find a guide to English for newcomers.
Yes.
And that's the only option there.
So are you looking for the language workshop?
Yeah.
So your language...
I'm in 10, so I don't know if that's different than what you have there for 8.
You did say that this is from.
So that's...
Oh, yeah. So yeah, if you're in grade 10, the language workshop, because the call of the state was to have your designated ELD for grades K through 8. We are developing the language workshop through 12th grade because there's just been, we've seen that high school teachers are still wanting that piece there. So I know that and Nancy, do you have any additional information on how that language workshop at the high school level is, where it's at now? Or?
No, but it's supposed to be ready within, they said by the end of the school year. So teachers districts that were looking at it, that loved it for middle school, started pushing the company. And that's one of the things I love about this company is that they create things when people start asking for it. Teachers who are on the front line. So it's in the works right now. Yeah, I haven't seen. I'll email the ELD specialist and see if they have any prototypes that we can see. I can forward it out to you. Yeah.
I was curious, since we have a totally different curriculum for ELD,
right,
aside from our mainstream anthologies, and I didn't really see this book being used in our ELD class.
No. You're going to have a separate one. So, does anyone have one? Is there one language
or workshop?
So the gal, the gray sweatshirt. Can you just hold yours up really fast? So that's what it's going to look like. It's that thick, so it's great.
But it is designed to access the core. It's
so
not
right now we have
edge.
No, right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm comparing it to. Is our edge, where it's that
Okay.
ELD curriculum.
Right.
Yeah, like a standalone.
Well,
Yes,
yeah, it
standalone
kind
in
of,
that.
but in the new state curriculum doesn't really, the level 2 isn't really intended for that.
That was the right criteria.
Yeah.
Edge is like a level 4 or something like that, or comparable, or level 3, where it's like a replacement of the core.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It'll definitely forward information to Erin, and then she can pass that out to you. Because I'm not sure actually what the communication is going to be between us, our team, Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt, and then the Natomas teachers. So we're waiting to get direction on that too. I offered to Christine Smith and then also Kevin McDonald. We're talking about if you want to have at lunchtime or after school, have any of our content specialists visit you or your classroom. We'd love to come in and help you get your students set up, because I know how hard that is when you've got a big group. I mean, everyone says teenagers are so tech savvy, but really they know how to go to Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and those things. So it's a different thing when you're talking about curriculum. And you'll see the engagement from your students. I know we only have a couple more minutes, but I'm just going to hold this up because this is my favorite thing. And I know Ricardo was just going to touch on this, but the partnerships that we have, these companies came to us. So A&E History and Bio Channel, you'll see amazing videos and resources that are really going to bring this literature to life in your classroom. It's one of my favorite parts of this program. So, we want to do another training with you. I think your district is talking about having a follow-up one or having we come to your school sites. I'm waiting for approval to see if we can actually come and visit your classrooms if you want us to. And then the other thing too is we're giving you passwords because we're giving you full access. So, do you remember what that was now, Ricardo? I just had it and it went off my phone, so let me just see.
I know the username setup that they have. I don't know if we got the...
Let me see what they just wrote. So,
Yeah, well, to that end, what Nancy had just mentioned, that you may have seen those icons, or even as you were moving through the book itself, you may have noticed that at the top of some of the anchor text that you were looking at, or even you may have seen in the digital overview that these icons were listed there. But many times students are going to be reading an informational text that is that may be dated. And I think it's safe to say this is from 7th grade collection 4. This is actually the final speech that JFK delivered before being assassinated. He was assassinated just the next day. And so, one, if anyone's ever read a political speech, you know it's pretty difficult. And two, if you've ever read a political speech from the 60s, and it was a little bit more flowery then. And so it's challenging. And I think also, it's safe to say that a 7th grader probably doesn't know much about the Cold War and the space race, or at least not yet. And so those partnerships, the way that they come in, is really about building that content knowledge or that background knowledge around some of these selections. You may find that oftentimes the social studies teacher may love you for this. But for example, before the students get into reading this particular speech, you have an opportunity, if you like, to bring in that history video. So part of that discussion around that background that we provide, you may find that bringing in that history video may actually be a really good way to get students excited about that selection, or just help build some knowledge around the particular context of the selection. So I'll play this here. This is from the History Channel. It's actually from a documentary that aired on the History Channel.
There were moments during the Kennedy administration when superpower rivalry was transformed from an expression of man's barbarity to an expression of mankind's ultimate capability.
We set sail on this new theme because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people.
Cape Canaveral,
So,
February 20th, 1962.
You'll have opportunities to bring in those different video pieces, which at the beginning of your collection or your unit in that digital overview, whether it's a close read screencast or a text and focus video or a history or an A&E video, which can help build background knowledge, all of those pieces will be listed on your digital overview. So as you approach planning of that unit, you can see ahead of time what pieces you have and if you would like to incorporate them in or not. Yeah?
Can you show us where we would find those online?
Yeah.
You always have to show the video at first. Where would that be?
Yeah, so you have a couple of options. One, it's embedded right in the ebook. The second place that you'll find those videos is under Teacher Resources. If you scroll down a bit, you'll see your history and A&E videos. And I'll go in there and click into it, and then you'll have access to all of those videos for that particular grade level.
In 1940, there are just a few thousand TV.
So you can have sort of access or a central location where all of them are housed, or from the ebook they're embedded right there on it. Yeah.
And you mentioned that the videos are embedded in the ebook. Can you highlight? Can you annotate at all
Yeah.
in the ebook as well?
Let me close these guys down, and so you can highlight your teacher ebook just like I'll show you the student ebook here. But generally, you're probably not going to annotate your teacher ebook, or at least, your wraparound pieces. But you have a student ebook that is yours. So just like your sample bag where you have a student book there that you could make your own, this ebook is going to be yours. So any annotating that you do or any note taking, it's going to be saved to your ebook. So you can always come back and access them. Something that I want to point out though, when you're in your student ebook as a teacher, up top, you'll see a little teal drop-down menu that says My Classes. This is where, if we've all done sort of those random notebook checks where we take 10 of our students' notebooks and make sure they're doing what we ask them to do. This is sort of like the digital equivalent. So if you have your students in their ebook annotating and you want to jump in and see what Timmy's doing, you could go in, jump to your class, find the student, and then jump into their ebook and sort of get a glance or a gander at what's going on there. But I'll come back and I'll point out that in terms of navigating the ebook, just like any ebook, I think, you have some options in terms of your viewing. If you want to look at one continuous scroll, one page at a time, or a book view. Also some zoom options. Navigating your ebook, you can do it by your contents. So just as you would look at your table of contents, you'll be able to navigate through your ebook that way. You can also jump to a particular page number using the little go-to page at the top. And the pagination is exactly the same. So if you're in a student, if you're in the student ebook, the pages are exactly the same as the print version, and the same is true for your teacher ebook. So you can just put in a page number and jump to it that way. But you can easily bookmark any page in the ebook. You can highlight text and create different types of annotation. So you can select different highlight colors. So if you're annotating to identify different elements of language, you can use those highlight colors to do that. You can underline. You can also take notes. So if we highlight something, and I'll just save that highlight, it'll show the highlight mark there. But say if you wanted to take a note, you can begin typing in and taking a note there. And anytime you do take a note, there's that little notepad icon that gets listed in the right. So students can annotate or highlight up, underline, sort of the same type of annotating that they're going to be doing in their close reader, although this is just going to be digital. And then all of those different annotations are saved for the student in their notes. So they can see all of those different annotations, whether it's a highlight or a note that they actually take. And when you jump into a student ebook, if you can actually respond to your student's annotations. So if Timmy, and I'm picking on Timmy right now, if Timmy was annotating and you were having them say identify similes maybe, and you're noticing that Timmy was marking or underlining things that were not similes, you could respond to that note and all of your responses would be listed here. So when Timmy went back in, they would see that you actually responded to some of the annotations that, that he had made. So your ebook is really not only can be a great tool from an instructional standpoint to project it up, and you have all of those pieces that are easily accessible because they're embedded right there on the page. But it's also great if you have your students in their ebooks. It's a nice way that you can easily check on some of those pieces. And sort of the last piece that I'll point out is, remember those analyzing the text questions directly from their student ebook. You see a little cue there. Students can answer those questions directly in their ebook, as well as get access to different resources that are embedded right there. So here, students can access this particular resource directly from their ebook, which can help them in answering those questions there. So you really have, I think the ebook can be used both from that instructional standpoint as well as give students an opportunity to be in that digital environment and have access to all those resources right, sort of embedded at point of use for them. All right, any more questions that you guys have? Yeah?
I just wanted to have everybody check to actually write down, you can use one of your little sticky notes that we gave you in the box, just so you have what your password is going to be. So all of the teachers were given full access to the program instead of just the evaluator account. And it should be your first name, last name, and then 2016. And then the password, when it asks for the password, is a capital P, the @ symbol, lowercase s, lowercase w, lowercase o, lowercase r, lowercase d, the number 1. So it's like password with the icon in the middle there. So
Yeah, that's what I was in.
okay, so you got that in. You got your after.
Yeah.
Okay.
But still no classes, and you can't make classes. So.
Okay, so we're putting the classes in full. Yeah. So we're going by the list. So I have Nathan Baker, Jeffrey Bryan, Aaron's not a teacher, Anna Hathaway, I'm just going to do last name, Sandoval, Walker, Manello, Odell, and Dittrich.
Yeah, Dittrich Sagen, yeah.
Sagen? Okay.
But I think they have me under Dittrich.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a comment. Myself and there was a teacher, Helm, we switched. So originally I was listed to do the other textbook
Yep.
and do 7th grade. Now I'm doing this textbook, 6th grade. So that would be my second period. So if they're going to be inputting the classes for me, they're
Okay.
going to need to know that
And what was your last name?
Monello.
Manello. Okay.
So it'll be my second period class.
So
6th
Manello,
grade.
6th grade. Okay. Only?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you get the materials then for your students? Did they switch?
I did get these textbooks, yeah, all the.
So that you have the correct grade level then since you switched? Okay, because that's the first thing I thought. I was like, uh-oh. Okay, great. Good. Did everyone receive their class materials too? They should have been individual boxes. Sorry they box them that way, but that's the way they do it. So the kids kind of get a little box to open up. Like I said, the kids can write in the consumable books. They're yours. We'll probably collect